Hey, Kevin here, Mr. DIY Dork from DIYDork.com. Today I'm going to show you how I'm going to turn this ugly old $10 Salvation Army table to a really awesome piece by reusing these leftover 2x4s from our house renovation. These 2x4s are nasty and ugly, and the table's even worse, but it's going to be awesome when it's done. Check this out. Alright, now that all the slats have been sanded smooth, I went ahead and I stained most of them. It's a little darker than I wanted, but I think it'll work. It shows off some of the rough cuts and all that. Alright, and then a few of them, I painted them gold, and then some of them white, and then I sanded them to give them a distressed look. I think it'll be interesting when it's all put together. So here's kind of a rough idea of what's going to look like. You have a lot of the darker wood, and then a little bit of gold pieces, and a little bit of the white. I think it'll be kind of interesting, especially with the white base. So now I'll show you how I'm actually setting up the pattern on top of the table. And now it's time to actually design the layout for the table. So I decided to go pretty simple, and at least for this first time, not get too complicated here. So what I did was I split the table in half of this line, lengthwise and widthwise. Then I went from corner to corner and have lines drawn all the way. And these would be my layout guidelines to help me figure out the pattern. All right, so I'm looking at this triangle right here and this big one up here on the long sides of the table. And right there, it's going to be a very simple wood pattern. I'm just going to line up on this side of the line and work that way, and then the same thing over here and work out that way, and just basically find this angle and cut all the tops of the boards at that length, and then glue them and nail them down, and then trim them out later. Those are really simple. Okay, for the sides here, these triangles are going to be a little different. I've decided to go ahead and cut, or actually figure out the angle, and then cut all my pieces like that. And of course it'll be the full length all the way down to there, and then each piece will get progressively shorter. So basically they're going to meet at an angle. So it'll be kind of a cool little setup there too. So I'll get started on that, and I'll kind of show you real quick how I'm doing it. All right, now that all my layout lines are on there, I decided to start laying out a little bit of pattern to get an idea of what it's going to look like. So I think I'm going to work with something like this. So what I'm going to do is stack these in order so I remember which way I wanted to use them. Take them outside, I cut them, and I'm bring them in here, and I'm going to slightly chop off some of the ends so that I can reuse those pieces later, and then I'll start installing them and show you how all this works. Alright, so I got the first few started already. You can see they worked out really well. So what I did over in the end, I just kind of drew a line so that I could go chop them outside real quick. And these are the leftovers. Then all these short pieces we can use for the really short pieces here, or like there in the corners and all that. So to install, all we're doing is we're just adding a bead of glue to the back of the boards. Just enough to hold it down, but not enough that's going to smush out everywhere. And then you just line it up to the line there. Make sure this point right here is the most important. So you want to make sure it's totally lined up. And then we're just running a couple nails in there. Longer boards getting like 4 nails. The shorter ones here, they're only getting about 3. All right, we're going to finish off this side, and then we'll move on to this side and then do all the rest of the pattern, and later on we'll chop them up. So I'll kind of keep you updated how this is going in just a second. All right, so we just about have all the pieces down. You can see the patterns turned out really cool. And we found that after doing it for a while, it's a lot easier to go ahead and lay down a bead of glue on the table and then stick the pieces on there, and then nail them down with about 3 or 4 nails. And I don't think I mentioned what nails we're using, but we're just using little brad nails that are 3/4 inch long. It's just enough to go through this little skinny wood and into the tabletop, but not shoot through the backside. Okay, also real quick, you can see I have a lot of hang off on the edges, and that's totally fine, because what we're going to do is draw a nice straight line that's even with the original tabletop, and we'll just cut them all off with a saw and then trim it out. So I'll show you all of that next. All right, so last night we finished installing the last of all the pieces on top. Looks really cool, but now we need to trim them up this morning. So first of all, let me show you something real quick. On the legs, what I decided to do was to tape off a little pattern here. You can kind of see the other leg back behind all the junk there. And the part that's exposed to white, we're going to spray gold to match up with the gold pieces on top. And then we also need to cut all these pieces to line up with the original tabletop so that we can then trim it off. So what I did was I laid on 3 layers of tape, and that way when I run the big skill saw on there and the blade's cutting across this line, it's just going to run on the tape, and it's not going to scratch all the tabletop pieces. You know, they're not going to get all scratched up. Okay, then to find the line of the old tabletop, it was really simple. I just took one of these boards and I went underneath the new stuff and I laid it up against the old tabletop there. And then, see where it pokes out? I just drew a line. And we just did that everywhere. And now all we have to do is follow that line and it'll be a perfectly cut tabletop edge that we can then trim out. Check it out. Brought it back in, and the tabletop looks really nice. It actually looks like a table now with everything cut evenly. So what I got to do now is finish this edge so that we can cover up where, you know, the old tabletop meets the new pieces. So what I've done is with the same kind of 2x4, so they cut these little less than 1/4 inch wide slats. I cut a chunkier, a little bit bigger than a 1/2 inch, maybe 5/8 or so, and it goes the full length. And what's going to happen is we're just going to attach it just like this with some glue and nails. And that way it adds a little oomph to the table, and you know, none of these will chip off, and it'll just add a little more durability. So let me add that to it next. Check it out. Now it's installed, looks really cool. And I think I forgot to mention, but I did it similar to the gold pieces on top. I just spray painted it gold and then I sanded most of it off, so it just gave it a really cool kind of distressed gold bar look to it. Now it's time to move on to the drawers. So what I did was, when I was staining all these boards up here, I just did the same with the drawer fronts. I was going to keep them raw, but it was too light looking, and the darker stain looks a lot better, and these turned out really nice, and they still kind of have, you know, a little bit of distressed look. So now it's time to work with the brass handles, and these are really grungy, so I'm going to go ahead and instead of painting them, I'm using a little Brasso on them to polish them up, so I'll do that next. Alright, it's taken some real elbow grease added with this Brasso, but check out the before and after. That's looking really nice. There's still a little bit of gunk on it, but I think since the whole table is kind of distressed, that we'll just call it antiqued brass and just leave it as is. But it turned out pretty nice. So now I put these on, and the last thing we got to do is clear coat the tabletop to protect it from any stains or anything like that. Alright, so then the finishing touch is I'm just using some of this clear lacquer, and just going to apply it to the wood top here, and do really good coat on there, let it dry for about an hour or two, and I'm going to put 2 more coats on it later. And I'm going to coat just the wood top. I don't think I'm going to mess with coating the painted legs. And then I'm also going to put it on the drawer fronts. And then once it's all dry, this thing will be ready to go, and I'll show you how it turns out. All right, the table is now finished. I'm just about ready to show you, but I want to point out something real quick. This clear lacquer right here, absolutely under no circumstances should you use this indoors. That was a huge mistake. It was about 20 degrees outside, so I couldn't do it outside. And we had the windows open, and I was still nauseous and headachy. This is nasty, nasty stuff. Do not use this indoors. What I ended up doing was finishing the rest of it with some water-based acrylic. The problem with it is that it does kind of leave kind of a rough finish, so I had to sand everything with 220 and then buff it out, but it turned out really nice. So now, let's see what the whole thing looks like. Turned out really cool. You can see it has a really low sheen, and then the stained drawers are really cool. And check out the handles, how nice they come out with the little bit of elbow grease and the Brasso. It turned out really nice. Then of course the legs with just the interesting little kind of angular paint job on there. I thought it turned out nice, kind of fit with the theme of the top. And of course the gold trim. Turned out really cool. And if you remember, this was only a $10 table I found at Salvation Army. The styling of it, I'm thinking maybe it used to be like a library study table or desk or something like that, but it was just so rough. And we just covered it with old 2x4s that used to be around the windows of our house. And it turned out really cool. A little bit of work, not too hard. The hardest part was probably figuring out the angles of the cuts. But other than that, a fairly simple project and a huge dramatic difference. So check that out.